Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ryan, for jumping in there for us. Yeah, I think we need to get started. It's about 10 after, and I believe we do have the majority of folks present today. So good afternoon. I am Michelle Blickert. I'm the TRPA Planning Manager. Welcome to our first meeting of the Transportation Performance Technical Advisory Committee. We are here today to guide the development of a 2024 Regional Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Strategy, Analysis and Recommendations Report. I'm not going to turn that into an acronym. I'll probably just call it an RTP, Analysis and Recommendations Report. So some logistics for today. We do have Jessica taking minutes for us. So we don't have any minutes to approve today. That'll be next time. And then Jess is also going to keep an eye for those online hands that might be raised. Today we have representatives in person and online from almost all the counties. The city of Southlake, we have Caltrans is online. Our two transportation management associations are represented here today. Transit agency reps. The league is here representing the non-government organization. Unfortunately, Ms. Carol Black, who's representing the public, was not available today, a last minute emergency. Additionally, we have a lot of TRPA staff from transportation planning team here. Additionally, research and analysis department. And I know Nick Haven's going to be joining us in a minute. And of course, our esteemed Chief Science and Policy Advisor, Dan Segan, is here. On screen right now, you should be seeing the agenda. I have to give you trouble, Dan. That's how it works here. Our agenda for today, it is a formal meeting today, and there is an opportunity for the public to speak as well. As part of that formality, we have an approval of minutes. We don't have those yet. This is our first meeting, so that's a slight modification to the agenda. And then, of course, we are going to adjust the agenda just a little bit and really focus today on reviewing the transportation metric trends. So that's a slight adjustment from the posted agenda about a month ago. After we talk about those metric trends, I'll discuss briefly our sort of timeline in the next meeting for this technical advisory committee, and then we'll open it up for those public interest comments. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit today about the Regional Transportation Plan. Again, it's called an RTP-SCS, that's Sustainable Community Strategy. Well, from here on out, pretty much I'll just say the RTP. The RTP is updated every 4 years. That is one of our metropolitan, can you go? Yeah, thanks. That's one of our metropolitan planning organization requirements. And the RTP, the goal is to set the vision for Tahoe's transportation system. And that means setting the vision with all of you here today, the public. And what we've discussed in the past in our last RTP is a system that is interconnected, interregional, and sustainable, connecting people and places in ways that reduce reliance on the private automobile. The Regional Transportation Plan is also the transportation element of the Tahoe Regional Plan. That's a document at the very top. So we update the regional plan transportation element with goals and policies once we approve the RTP. So that's how that cycle kind of works. New to the game here is the transportation report. That is developed with you all here today. And we include in that report high-level transportation metrics to track implementation. We're also going to be you will be providing some guidance on program policy modifications to attain and maintain our new VMT threshold standard. That's really how this report came to be. And then lastly, adaptive management responses that we'll work on that can be implemented if the region is not reaching those vehicle miles traveled milestones and achieving our transportation goals. Next slide. So the RTP, just a little reminder, has 6 goals. We're looking to improve safety for all users, enhancing connectivity across modes. We're supporting economic vitality, protecting the environment with reductions in GHG and VMT, preserving the transportation system and coordinating operations to better manage it. These goals have numerous policies, all of which make up the transportation element of that regional plan. Next slide. So on to the reporting cycle and where you all fit in. So TRPA staff and even some of you have helped us collect recent data for this review. This committee will then evaluate that performance and draft management responses. And then a report is delivered to the governing board. That's sort of the process there. And then we'll seek their approval of that report, which helps guide the development of the RTP. So we're checking our performance, we're making some adjustments, and this is all going to feed into our 2050 regional transportation plan. Next slide. So about a year and a half ago, maybe almost two now, we set the structure for that report where we had a host of primary metrics, beginning with transit. We had transit ridership we all decided we'd be tracking, and that's with fixed route and microtransit data would be collected. And then we'd consider how much service and the neighborhood served, looking to increase ridership. That's the goal, plain and simple. For active transportation, we chose bike and ped overall mode share and low stress bike ped lane miles. That one here is new, right? We've continually collected lane miles of the past that we create in the facilities and the bike lane striping that we do, but we've not actually looked at the details. Striped lane, adjacent to a fast moving vehicle, or is it a protected facility that makes somebody feel a lot safer and is used probably a lot more? Additionally, we're going to be looking into our increases in not auto trips and complete a safe ped bike network. And so then for auto, those two metrics, we look at those and we look at annual average daily vehicle miles traveled per capita. And then currently our baseline annual average is at about 12.48. So our goal here is to reduce that to 12.35 when we complete our next check, which is what we're doing right now. Next slide. So today, really, I'm going to focus and give time to transit. That was that first metric. So I'm going to walk you through a few trends, and then I'm going to turn it over to the operators to provide more background and understand the trends, right? They're the ones out there day to day dealing with getting that service out there. So today, like I said, I'll be going over a couple metrics, and then I'm really going to turn it over to the transit agencies who are here today with us. So starting with 2018, definitely the peak for our transit trips in the region. And as a region, we're getting right back there again, recovering from a pandemic and the Caldor fire. Totals in 2023 shown here through October only. We do appear to be getting back on track and potentially even hitting, at least the 2022 total. We've had November and December months in the past that total over 100K. So it's actually looking like we might at least meet it, if not exceed it. Next. Additionally, kind of looking other way. Let's look a little deeper into the seasons and the operators a little bit. One more. Here, we've got a nice color-coded map, a little probably better to see on your screens in your home office there. But some of the transit trends, sure, in 2020, you can definitely see a nice dip there. But looking forward, we can see that TART and TART Connect, that's shown in the light green and the turquoise. In January of 23, the two services, one fixed route, one microtransit, had over 97,000 riders. And the operator, Miss Jamie Wright, is here today. She can correct me on that, but it does look like that's the most ridership we've noted even back in 2018. She's giving me a nod, so that's a good thing. And then for the South Shore, TTDs in blue and red there, and Lake Link in orange. Lake Link is one of our newer services. This past July, ridership for those two services combined was at about 41,000, and that's trending back up, getting closer to 56,000 that TTD provided alone in July of 2018. While TTD fixed route on the South Shore is getting back to steady hourly service, There's still some recovering to do to get to the services back to those 2018 peaks. Next slide. And so last on transit, before we start our conversation, the other metrics that we had noted here were selected to consider service, looking at coverage and the amount of service provided, not just total ridership. So the map identifies residential census block groups to provide population highlighted in the green and blocks that contain transit service within our region. So the two metrics for service focus on getting us to frequent service. That's 20 minutes as we've defined it. And back in 2018, there was a short period. We had about 4 months where Tahoe Transportation District was providing close to 20-minute headways. I like to call 2018 our glory days. Now with microtransit in the mix, we've discussed back when we were identifying these metrics to include microtransit. And I do propose here how we track coverage and trends, right? It's a little challenging with microtransit, it's a different beast. But with looking at, maybe we can look at service area that they cover and checking those trends on where those expansions are occurring. And hours of service being provided, right? Where the transit agency is able to extend those hours. So at this point, I wanna turn it over to our operators to sort of talk about and dive a little bit deeper and give you a little bit more idea of kind of what's going on behind the scenes, because we are just holding steady right now. Maybe there's a little bit of a comeback here that's happening, getting back to those glory days. So if I might call on Tart first to start the conversation, and those online, those panel members, online panelists for us representing agencies, please raise your hand and we'll kind of I'll try to facilitate this conversation that we want to have today. Thank you, Jane.
So good afternoon, everyone. Jamie Wright with Placer County. I manage the TART system as well as the contract for the TART Connect service, both in Placer County and Washoe County. We do partner with the town of Truckee, and so we are all singly branded. I think for Placer County, yes, we certainly are getting back to the ridership potential that we were seeing pre-COVID. Especially when we launched Free to the Rider in December of 2019. And so we had a 48% ridership increase in February of 2020. And so that was our peak that we were trying to get back to. I will say fixed route has struggled a bit, and that is very much related to the amount of service I'm able to deploy related to staffing. TART continues to sit at about a 45 to 50% vacancy. Right now, we do have some contractors that come out of Reno and assist us. That ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'll have 0 contractors to assist, and other times I'll have 5. With the passage of AB5, that contract, once it expires in 2026, I will no longer have that opportunity to utilize contract drivers. And so a lot of them are applying within the county, and we have seen a number of applicants over the last 6 to 8 months. So that is starting to turn around for us. We do have a sister operation down in Western Placer County, Placer County Transit. That operation also went through some very deep staff shortages down there. Very rare for that urban environment necessarily go through that for Placer County. We have been successful in fulfilling all of those vacant positions. And so that will help us shift some of that staff to Tahoe. Our sister operation does not operate on Sundays nor on holidays. And so it's easy to shift some of those that are cross-trained up here during our peak holiday periods to have them help operate at TART. TART has pulled all of our fixed route night service. This has allowed us to focus all of our resources within the daytime. This allows us, especially in the wintertime, to provide some of that peak AM and PM 30-minute service that our resort partners are very much reliant on to move many of their seasonal workers around. So you'll see just some weird things, I think, with our system. While yes, overall public transit usage is up in Placer County with the adoption of free fares and the TART Connect program. Our fixed route is, well, we're probably doing some of the best productivity that we've ever done. And when you're looking at the number of hours that we're operating and the number of people that we're moving, we aren't operating as many service hours as we used to with fixed route. Every season that changes for us. Last winter I was operating a lot less than I am this winter. So we've been able to bring things incrementally back as we do get staff. TART Connect, I know they tend to be just as challenged when it comes to staffing. They're hiring a different driver classification. So the drivers driving TART Connect are not commercial drivers. I require you to be a commercial driver when you drive fixed route service for Placer County. I think many years ago, we all thought the magic fix would be, hey, let's change our system and get it so that we can have folks that are not commercially licensed to operating transit. It has helped, but I don't think it has moved the needle where we quite thought it was going to go. There is still challenges. They are still a public sector type employee. There still is expectations of those employees. And sometimes I think that is lost on it all. Right now, we allow the TART Connect drivers to collect tips. That continues to be a real challenge for me. And so I'm looking at taking their tipping mechanism away. And at the same time, I know that's very much how they're getting people to drive vehicles. And so it's a double-edged sword because it is a public transit service. And when I get complaints of people who choose not to use TART Connect because they have to put a credit card in to tip a driver when they're registering. And while you don't have to, there's a perception you do. And so they just don't use it. I've had issues where, I get complaints pretty regularly from folks in the community, like, hey, the driver is demanding a tip. We are at our final straw with the operator on that. One more complaint and I will be pulling tipping from the operating staff, and they're gonna have to figure out how to accommodate their staff and the wages appropriately. That's always impactful on us as operators, because when I don't allow them to do that because of the public perception, my contract costs go up. And so then you're still trying to find the dollars to operate the services. TART Connect has certainly proven to be very successful for us. The first mile, last mile component, we're seeing a connection on our fixed route. About 80% or so of riders, I think it is right now, are saying they use TART fixed route as well, whether they're using it daily or weekly. But there is a lot of cross connection between our TART Connect and our TART system, which is good to see. That's the goal of it. We want to see people using Big Bus to get longer distances and using TART Connect within their zones to do some of the things within their own community. So that is working. The way we currently operate our microtransit service is through a third-party turnkey operator. They do everything for us, vehicles, insurance, app, drivers, all of those wonderful things. In the transit industry, that is extremely expensive to continue to operate. When you look at taking those types of things in-house and utilizing your own assets to do so, it results in being a fraction of the cost if you're going to continue to deploy these services. So right now at the county, we will be embarking on a systems plan update, which is really going to look at our fixed route as well as our microtransit. Hopefully look at staffing levels and make them some recommendations on the type of service levels that we deploy based on staffing availability. And that may help us kind of with these seasonal ebbs and flows. I've had the pleasure of working with Placer, not for, but with Placer County for a number of years. And as we have deployed different services in our region and kind of looked at how that impacts our transit systems and how we continue to operate, I think finding how we can probably spend less money moving into the future would be advantageous for us as transit operators. I know the basin, it's challenging, we can't seem to cross the barrier when we're looking for our own funding mechanism. Us in Placer County, we have TOT, but there's only so much TOT to go around. And so if we want to keep deploying innovative transit solutions, we're going to have to find the most cost-effective way to do that. And part of that is looking at bringing some of these things in-house. On the California side, maybe not on the Nevada side, we're tackling AB5 right now. For those of that don't know, it's becoming a bit more difficult to hire contractors of any nature if they're going to be using your assets. Or you have any type of control over them and you employ the same type of position. So bus drivers are a big deal. I employ bus drivers on a daily basis, and a lot of our contracted services have been set up to where the county's assets are being used, and then we're using the contractor to maybe operate those assets. 85's changed that for me. And we're looking at taking a lot of our services in-house. When we go to do our TART Connect RFP this year, we'll be looking at a contract term of 3 years with 2 one-year options that we can exercise for a total of 5 years. But throughout the next 3 to 5 years, we will be looking at procuring a fleet and looking at how we take the service in-house so it can be operated at a much more reasonable rate.
That's great, Jamie. I think you bring up a good point too, where we're sitting in here and we're gonna be looking at the trends of the past and like where things are headed. You guys are still doing your own planning work, and especially in transit. So definitely, I think that can be a part of that bigger conversation when we move into those management decisions and some of those things that we can do as TRPA and what you need done, and how we can work through that. Before we turn it over to TTD to kind of give behind the curtain, want to see if there's anyone online that might have questions or other people that want to ask Jamie any questions right now.
Is one hand raised?
I think that's an error. I was checking in with him on that. So,
Okay.
well, let's give him a moment if he's there.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like Eric Royer just raised his hand.
All right, Eric, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Eric Royer for Caltrans Highway Operations District 3. I'm fairly ignorant of the nuance of the internal issues involving transit operators, and I'm wondering what are some of the problems you guys have in recruiting drivers, I guess, is it? Or is it other staffing positions that are limiting service frequency or whatever it is you're looking to add there?
For us, it is the recruitment of operators. It's always been a challenge. And I will say, coming out of COVID, it was probably more of a challenge, I would say, for every transit operator across the country. It's really been an industry-wide issue. I have personal opinions. I don't think they get paid enough, especially here in Tahoe. Knowing what my staff does on a daily basis, I probably wouldn't want that job either, and not for what they get paid. And so I think that's a challenge at the county. We've done our best to address that, but we work for a large county of 5,000 people. And so what impacts my staff then impacts the rest of the positions and how pay works within the county. So they are doing a complete pay analysis for the county, which hopefully will help. But I think there's a couple things. I think the cost of housing up here is challenging. Most of my staff is coming out of Reno. A good 76% of my staff comes out of Reno. I have people who have chosen to work for a contractor instead of the county directly, to avoid paying state income tax. So they're coming out of Reno and working for a Reno company, through our contractor, and not having to pay the income tax they would if they came to work for the county. I think rate of pay, housing, working conditions, I think really all contribute to, the lack of drivers that we have.
I think I would just like to add a couple of points to that. Thinking about, this is George Fink with TTD. Thinking about that with the drivers too, is, when we're looking at this from a greater transportation, policy, and we want to reduce VMT, but you have 76% of your employees coming from Reno every day. And then most of ours in TTD are coming up from Carson City or from Minden Gardnerville. If you're up here in Tahoe, you get what's called, the Tahoe tax of living here. And part of that is, somebody is coming up from Reno, they're driving a long way, and they're going through a pass. And, they have to pay for that gas, the wear and tear on the vehicle, probably 2 sets of tires, winter and a summer tires, and all those things add into why it is so expensive just to work over here. And we've had, just as bad labor shortage, as the North Shore. And there's just plenty of jobs in the Reno, Carson, Minden, Gardnerville area where they don't have to do that. They don't have to fight going over a pass and the snow and the ice and the road closures and the traffic. They can just drive 20 minutes and they got the same job for the same pay or even more. And that's tough, not to mention, the housing prices that were already high. And then after the pandemic, now they're just ludicrously high. There's no hope for them to be able to find someplace to live in the basin. If they're looking to rent something, it's probably gonna be with roommates, and that's providing they can find something. And then if they find something, can they afford it? It's not easy, and we don't really pay better than anybody else does, and that makes it a tough sell.
Good transition, George. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Tahoe Transportation District, any of the trends and that ridership kind of behind the scenes stuff? I know some of that glory day, as I said, was also when you guys were operating the Heavenly Shuttles, right?
Sure, and
Yeah.
as Michelle pointed out, that's an awesome transition, because that's what you see on the chart for the ridership trend is the beginnings of our labor issues that date back to 2017, 2018. We were doing ski shuttles that served to take the capacity and move the capacity that Heavenly generates, Heavenly Ski Resort generates. But we did not have the ability to continue to staff those. We could not get those seasonal employees, much to the same reason of, to a lesser extent, but, trying to find full-time employment in Tahoe is hard enough. Being able to come up here and just find seasonal employment, I think that's almost an impossibility now. But that's where you see those huge spikes in 2018 in the wintertime, is that was ski shuttles. And that was the last year that we did ski shuttles. Then you see these other smaller spikes in the summertime. And that's East Shore Express, and then you see the pandemic. We didn't run East Shore Express for 2 years, then you see another summer spike later in 22, in July 22, and that's East Shore Express again on the North Shore. What you see with our productivity is that I think people still like the product of public transit, and we see that in our productivity has actually gotten better on a passengers per hour basis. It's just consummate with how much service we have. The loss of ridership is consummate with the loss of service hours. It's not a systemic issue with public transit per se, there's not enough service to move those people, on the system. And, here you see the very small red lines, and that's the paratransit system, and you don't see a lot of change in that. But you do see a little bit of a narrowing of that red line, and that's the adult day programs that we used to serve quite a bit of before the pandemic, and those went away during the pandemic, and they just haven't come back. So those riders aren't there, those services don't exist, so we don't need to take riders to those services. And many of those people have had to find, off the hill solutions or just move out of the basin entirely. So it's definitely a tough go. We've had some fleet issues as well that have contributed to that, and we embarked on a fleet replacement program. We've done 4 brand new diesel buses. We have 3 electric buses that are about pushing on a year and a half old now, and that's another challenge that we've had. We tried to be a very early adopter of electric, but then we had to wait 5 years to get the buses, so we weren't as early as we wanted to be. Then we finally got the buses in place, we got the charging in place. That was another long lead time fiasco to get that to work. But where we find ourselves is, we were 1 year into operating these electric buses and the manufacturer went bankrupt. Now, as all these things go, it's always gonna be hey, this isn't gonna be a problem. Well, we'll see. I hope that it's not a problem. I hope that things actually improve. But that's a risk for us, is these buses have a useful life of 12 years. We're in year 1, and now we have to, basically fingers crossed that everything's gonna work out, with the new, owner. And they split the company, I think, into 3 or 4 different divisions, and different entities bought those 4 different pieces of the company, so we'll see how well they work together. But we've also found that, Truckee had told us, not Truckee, but Alfred Knotts that works for Truckee, used to be in Park City, and he said that when they deployed electric, they were at 1.7 electrics, per diesel, because of the downtime and other challenges that you get. That is certainly something that we found. We're about 2 to 1, electric buses to diesels, just for availability. And most of that isn't so much that they're unreliable, it's that when you do have something go down, that's the lead time to get parts, that really kills us on that. The other challenge that we have with South Shore is that there's a lot of discussion around frequency and getting to a higher frequency. When we implemented electric buses, that actually slowed down the routes, because we had to go off route to where the chargers were, or are, because we still have to do that, and then go back into regular service. So we have to take that deviation off of our main route that used to be a straight shot across town. Now we have to deviate out to LTCC, do an on-route charge, and then get back on route. And we've just found that complicates how fast we can get across town. So these are all things to consider, when you're looking at electric, there are gonna be challenges to that. Placement of your infrastructure is gonna be critical. To that end, we're also working on a zero emission fleet conversion plan that's gonna have some of these challenges. Michelle, can you, or Kira, are you controlling slides?
I am.
Or is it going?
Yeah.
Okay, could you go back to the slide that has the service area? The routes
Forward.
for everybody, I guess that's one, yeah. So when you look at our service area in Nevada that goes all the way to Carson City, when we're looking at our electric buses, we have to think about, well, what's gonna be the electric charging infrastructure in Minden, Gardnerville, and Carson City? Otherwise, if we take an electric off the hill, we're not coming back, because we'll just run out of power. So we're gonna have to plan for how that's gonna work. We're gonna have to partner with the entities down there to be able to make sure that we're still energized. Same thing as if we're going up the East Shore, there's no charging infrastructure there on the East Shore. And we'll probably have to look for something at, hopefully, the new mobility hub at Schooner / AIS station up there. Can put in some charging infrastructure there to help both TTD and maybe Reno RTC if they're coming over that way. The other interesting thing I wanted to point out here is that our service area, we always get compared to North Shore because, we're two people, we both operate around the lake. That's an easy comparison. It's like, oh, how is North Shore doing to South Shore? When you take that big long line in between Carson City and South Shore, and there's nobody there. Comparatively to South Shore's line, that's just as long pretty much on the main line there in between Incline and Tahoma, but there's lots of little communities along there. There's really nobody that we're picking up in between, Minden, Gardnerville and Carson City. That's just miles and hours, just burning money going across there. So it's something to think about when, there's very different types of service, very different costs and different ridership, and there's different reasons that we do these things. I know that the RTP goal is total ridership, but there's also, TTD's kind of tagline is connecting our communities, and that's something that we want to remain focused on, is that we're providing that community connection to Carson City and to Minden Gardnerville, because that's where people live and that's how they get up to the basin. That's where people in the basin go to actually see their doctor or shop at stores that are a bit more affordable. Is getting down there to Walmart, Winco, Target, Costco. The only dialysis center, the nearest dialysis center to Tahoe is in, I think it's in Minden. So, you have these services that are necessary. There's a reason that we go down there to connect to those cities. It's not necessarily about ridership, but it's about, being a public service, to the people. So there's a time for ridership and there's a time for connectivity and what we would call a lifeline transit service as well.
Absolutely, George. Forgive me, we're about 15 till. We have one hand raised and I still want to get to the South Shore TMA.
That's okay.
No, you were going way behind the curtain and that's good. Because I think eventually those are the kind of things we want to understand. We think about the barriers that need to be removed. Or, we're gonna look at it a little differently, like you're saying. So Eric, it looks like you have your hand up again.
I was just looking at the route diagram there, and I was wondering if there was any benefit to a Carson City route going up the East Shore and out Highway 50 rather than through the south, the state line route down there.
Yeah, and I think this gets to also, George, just you want to speak to a little bit of the planning, right? Your short range transit plan.
Right, so we're in the midst of updating our short range transit plan, and one of the proposals that we'll be bringing forward in there is to reestablish a connection that we used to have from South Shore to Carson City, up 50 and through Spooner. That was our most productive commuter route at the time. However, that was not ended on a technicality of when we switched over to being UZA money, then that was connecting UZA to UZA, which we couldn't use Nevada 5311 funds for anymore, and we didn't have sufficient 5307 funds in order to continue to operate it. So, that was something that we changed and put more emphasis on getting to Carson City via Minden and Gardnerville.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to talk a little bit about the South Shore TMA and Lake Lake?
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. I put in the chat just so people would have the numbers, but Lake Link, the good news is we've been increasing ridership. Seems like each month over the last several months, year over year, we've increased significantly. The total ridership for the month of December was 13,961, so almost 14,000, 77% increase over December a year ago. As some of you know, as of January 17th, this month, we expanded our service area. In Douglas County, we're now going to the Round Hill neighborhood, the Round Hill Mall, and the neighborhood behind there, and a little farther up Kingsbury Grade, up to about the Chart House, farther into South Lake Tahoe, out to, at least along the Highway 50 corridor, out to where the grocery outlet store is, and in some of the neighborhoods leading up to that in the westward direction from the city. So the city has put in additional money to help us with that. So the big challenge I see was mentioned, is trying to expand service, and we're adding vehicles and we're adding some additional service on Friday and Saturday nights to later hours. The big challenge is doing that and keeping the wait times reasonable. And so we had a TMA board meeting this morning. We had a lot of conversation about that. We're going to come up with some ways we think we can make it more efficient so that when we add service, and that it's just a huge amount of demand, which is good. The good news is people want to ride, but if they get something that's like, hey, you have to wait over an hour, that's not a good thing. Then the other thing I wanted to mention, in partnership with the Tahoe Transportation District, we've been working on a system whereby the app for the Lake Link and the TDD's apps for their service can be integrated so that somebody can, ride the fixed route, and then if they need to go into a neighborhood where the fixed route doesn't serve, they can transfer over to Lake Link. And so it's that first mile, last mile situation that we can provide rather than trying to, duplicate any service along the main route that TDD provides, although certainly I know that we all struggle with frequency. But at any rate, it's generally a good news story. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a situation where some private sector partners, and I'll speak to the ones in South Lake Tahoe primarily, some private sector partners are providing some funding for the service, and others, maybe the business next door, is not, for whatever reason. So we're looking at potentially doing either an overlay on the existing tourism business improvement district, or adding a separate but companion transit improvement district so that businesses would be able to vote on establishing a business improvement district specifically for the purpose of contributing funds to the Lake Link service. So I think that's a positive. We're trying to get to a more sustainable funding source. And I see my board colleague, Mr. Feiger, there in the room. And Gavin, if you want to add anything, feel free, please.
No, thanks, Steve. I think you covered it. Yeah, the not struggling with drivers, not having problems with tips, just an insatiable demand. Like there's just, yeah.
And like our colleague friends on the North Shore, we are also launching a van pool program. We're working with major employers and actually employers of various sizes who have concentrations of employees either in Carson City or the Carson Valley, or even for some on the Nevada side who have concentration of employees elsewhere in South Lake Tahoe or Myers, to put together a van pool. It's a turnkey operation with what used to be Commute with Enterprise, and it's now Commute Mobility, whatever they call it. It's a division of Enterprise Rental Car, and it's a really easy program to use. And so we're engaging in conversations with a lot of employers that are interested, as was pointed out by George when he talked about trying to get people to drive coming up from Reno or Carson or whatever. We want to get our employees here in a most efficient way that helps to reduce VMT. And when they arrive, they're ready to go. And when they get home, they don't have to worry about having necessarily driven all the way. So I think there's a couple of real positives that bear on the transit situation for the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one hand up online, and then I'll go to George. Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, thank you. A question I forgot to ask earlier, and I forget the name of the previous speaker, excuse me. But I was surprised to hear that you guys have electric buses that have to charge up during the day on the route. They don't have a range to operate a full day without without recharging.
Well,
Yeah, this is George Fink with TTD. No, there's a stark difference, just like you read in the news about Tesla, between the marketing, business development, and the reality of operating in an alpine environment. So for us, summertime, you get a lot more range out of them. That's great. Wintertime, you have to keep the batteries warm. You have to keep the bus warm. So it does tend to suck quite a bit of power out of that. We anticipated that when we were building the system. So they do have on-route chargers. So the bus can come in and the bars drop down onto the top of the bus. It picks up some charge for about 10 minutes at 450 kilowatts. And then, they're back on route. So it's not it's not too disruptive from an electrical charging, side, but it is something that you just have to, work into the schedule so that, you'll have a driver break or a lunch break there. So it's just something to bear in mind when you're designing your schedule, that you need to design around, that on-route charging, because you certainly don't wanna, end up where you're out of juice and you have to tow it.
I know in the old days, there used to be electric buses in some cities. Is that an option that's ever worth exploring? I mean, as far as overhead electric, they didn't
Yeah.
have the battery technology, I guess.
Right. So I don't know if we'd wanna put, tables like, San Francisco.
Seattle has them too.
That might be a little bit of a fire hazard, I would think, in Tahoe, dropping branches on it.
We haven't gotten to that part, looking at that yet.
The question I had is, Gavin, you had mentioned, not having an issue with tips. Are LakeLink drivers, do they tip?
They can accept cash tips, but we don't have it on the app. So you don't have to put in a credit card or anything when you sign up.
Yeah, I have more problems with my cash tips.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Put
we
a
haven't
little
really-
bucket up front.
Yeah, we
It's
haven't heard
really
any complaints or anything, or
just
not that, I don't know if
based on-
Steve's heard anything, I haven't heard anything, so.
Yeah.
It's Downtown too, the same operators, I don't know. Yeah,
You just probably haven't heard them yet.
yeah.
All right, any other questions in the room? We've got a few minutes left. I could hit next steps and what we've got going.
One
Carl,
question for
please.
you, so does this data include Heavenly's?
It
service?
did, yeah, I mean, back in,
No, in
oh,
18.
today's heavenly
Today's.
shuttles. No, it does not. It doesn't include some of those private shuttles now, even the one from the airport, airporter or heavenly. We can certainly, like, I think you remember when we were setting up the reporting system, like, I think there's gonna be data that maybe in the future we can get access to
Yeah.
that we don't have access to today. Airporter was one of them that we were
Right,
trying to get some access to, and now with heavenly shuttles, it's possible. that
You
we
also
can
have Eldorado Heavenly that comes up from Placerville.
yeah, with the Amtrak
It's
bus.
just, yeah.
Right, oh, and that one, and that's another one, that one bus.
Amtrak is pretty, yeah, that should be easy to track. The Heavenly is tough because they do not,
They don't release it.
yeah, well, they
Yeah.
don't,
It's more privatized than ever. I think where you see the data showing up is when it was more commingled with the public services.
Yeah, that's the
Using
Yeah.
TPE
Publicly
was,
funded vehicles, now it's completely private.
yeah.
well, they don't even count the number of people that get on the bus, there's that whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's the methodology.
Yeah,
I was gonna
Just
add
cram
that
them
as,
all in.
even when
Yeah.
TTD was doing the shuttles.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
hard to track.
Heavenly had no, requirement that we counted anybody or anything like that, and a lot of times there was just so many people on their drivers, just like estimating, it's like, yeah, it looks like about 60 folks, let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be ideal to have that. I mean, we need to
Yeah.
show the full picture, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, that means that we can work towards.
Get those, automatic passengers.
just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's 2:58. Can you advance us to slide 13 then? Yeah. All right, those are the slides we didn't get to today, but that's okay. Keep going. There we go. All right, so this is our first meeting at kickoff. We talked transit. Up next, we'll continue this conversation. We're gonna be focusing on active transportation. And so for active transportation, we identified mode and those other metrics about getting to kind of the level of stress on our streets for biking and walking. I sent out a doodle poll to you all. I got a handful of respondents and it looks like March 15th, which is a long ways away. But I know it's hard to get you all together from 10 to noon. Yeah, if you want to check those calendars right now, if you didn't participate in that, I'd appreciate,
I didn't participate and I'm unavailable.
and you're unavailable. Well, transit is kind of done for what it's worth, Jamie, not that I want to boot you out, but we will, well, I guess it's not, this is so hard. Well, I'm finding, because actually next time I would like us to kind of get through transit and move into the auto metrics, potentially getting to adaptive management responses, which is where it would be great to have you back in it. What do we do from here? So I sent out a bunch of dates. Is there another date? There was one more date on there in March. I think it was like March 1st. That was a potential. And of course, you are always welcome to have an alternate come.
March 1st works for me if that was another option.
Yeah, I think it's Dan, sorry, Dan, that it doesn't work for.
Oh, it's Dana.
Yeah, not to call him out again, I'm terrible. How is that looking for others? It's, I think, let me get that, pull that up. It was March 1st.
When did you send that poll out, Michelle?
It was in an email. You might have not been forwarded that email. Mona had it. Yeah.
Are you talking more?
Yeah, so on March 1st, 1 to 3 was the time that a few folks were available. Another Friday, that's when it seems like I can get you all together. What was that, Carl?
TTD will have to look, because we usually have a committee meeting.
On Friday?
First, is that a Friday?
March 1st is a
No,
Friday.
that could work.
Yeah.
Yes, I see.
I wanna check back in with Rebecca Tabor from Placer County on that.
I'm checking my emails right now.
Well, who was that? Sorry, forgive me.
Hi, Michelle, this is Mona. I am checking my emails right now for those dates.
Thanks, Mona. Yeah, it was a separate email from the invite, a doodle poll. How's that working for you guys at Caltrans? March 1st?
March 1st or 5th, are we effective first?
One, yeah, because Jamie's not available on the 15th. 1 to 3, March 1st, 1 to 3. I think Gavin, you had a yes there.
Yeah, that's fine still, yeah.
Steve DeSharis just said March 1st is better for him.
Okay.
My calendar's completely free on the 1st right now.
Me too as well.
Thank you, Mona. Yeah. All right, let's run with. I'm looking for other folks chiming in the chat. Let's change that to March 1st. And I said 1 to 3. Okay. So we'll continue talking about then. We're gonna move into active transportation. By March 1st, we will also have our active transportation plan out on the street. As I mentioned, right, we're in this room, but there's a lot of planning work that's going on at the same time. And in that plan, we have, you know, a host of projects and policies that all feed into the same conversation and how we want to keep ourselves kind of getting back on track. So we'll stick with March 1st. We'll talk about active transportation, and if there's time, which I hope there is, we can get into the autometrics, which was average daily VMT, and looking at congestion. With that, keep in mind that future discussion really, which is what the report is all about, is adaptive management responses. So what we're talking about is thinking about what are the things, like I said, TRPA, like what can we do here? What are those, you know, opportunities we have here? And that's some of the FTIP and the STIP, that project selection process. It's also about the regional transportation plan, which we've been talking a little bit about. So in April, we'll be kicking that off. We're already kind of thinking about what that project list looks like today. But this group can also be kind of diving into more on a higher level, like where do we want to shift what we can, when it makes sense, those funding sources, you know, where should we be focusing those funding sources? And then we have a host of program changes. That's like the regional grant program that we at TRPA administer. So we have criteria for selecting those projects. Those are some of the things that we can potentially tweak to help us get back on track. And of course, policy changes. You know, in the planning work that we're doing, and I just mentioned with the active transportation plan, there are some things that we can talk about. How do we bolster some of those policies? What are some of the barriers you're experiencing that we can, you know, be removing? And modification then to the project impact assessment framework. Now that gets down to the very local level project development and how those projects contribute to transportation as well, depending on their impacts. So that's those are some of the sort of levers that we have as an agency here and as a committee. And then the other thought is thinking about maybe how we can remove some of the barriers that you might be feeling, and some of that policy stuff I just described. I think I was talking to Gavin the other day about it. And it's what was the change we were discussing that TRPA did, for example?
For the, like the current, for like permitting, like
Yeah,
the
some of
current
the-
planning initiative that Arlo did, yeah. There's,
Some of those initiatives included, well, previously, right, was coverage, right? That's something that we're able to tweak our policy so that a trail isn't considered coverage, right? Like a ped
and then some,
bike
oh yeah,
path.
that was like the process and then some specific things that
Yeah.
could be looked at in that it was, were, yeah, like bike paths. When was that? 4 or 5 years ago, some time ago, longer,
Yeah.
decided they didn't need coverage anymore because it was a net benefit to water quality. So even though there was some coverage, so it exempted them from coverage, so they're looking at some options like that.
Some of the programs, maybe they're like, you know, getting a little bit heavier hitting with some of the programs like our travel demand management. Some of the regulations that we have currently in our code, like. there are
Like
some
the
things-
employer trip reduction is, I mean, that's like something that's in the code, just not, you know,
Right,
complied with or whatever you're on force. You know, it's just voluntary right now, even though it is technically a requirement. So is that something that like needs to be
Right.
enforced?
and so these are some of those recommendations that we're gonna be talking about. So next time, we'll probably just get through those metrics, active transportation and auto. And then if we have some time, start to kind of thinking about how all of these work together, right? When I talked about mode share being a metric for active transportation, mode share also is about transit ridership, right? So they all do kind of come together and thinking about what are those programmatic changes? Maybe they're specific, or maybe there's a bigger programmatic change that needs to be made. And this all will be feeding in to the regional transportation plan too, which is that regional vision and policy. I see Carl is spinning a bit. I would love to open it up to you. I have one more slide after this.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You want to do
No, no,
slide or do you want
please,
me
it's
to-
okay.
So would you speak again to the performance report
Yeah,
and its role? What's the expectation out of that report? What is its purpose?
I'm gonna be distilling those trends that we were talking about here. And the future conversation on what are those changes we wanna see. And then that report is then given to the board to either accept it or make us come back together and revisit it.
But they're not making any decision about anything, or is it helping to direct them? I guess that's where I'm a little lost, other than it being like, here's what's going on. Does it have more of a regulatory purpose than that? In terms of helping drive any changes for
That's
the
what,
like, and are you kind of, because what you're telling me here, what I'm talking about with adaptive management,
yeah,
almost reminds me of my past experience with, here's mitigations, and if it's really not working, here's another set of mitigations that are recommended to do. Is
I
that
don't
what you're
think
kind of
that's-
talking about with this
I mean, I
performance
guess you could
report?
look at it that way, but that's not how I see this. I see this as if there are some policy changes or programmatic changes we wanna make,
Mhm.
that's where we come together collectively and decide what those are. If the grant program needs to change up and only focus on active transportation, right? So every dollar we can goes to active.
So it could be an assessment report as well as potential recommendations for the TRP board to consider.
Absolutely. For us, it's a transportation planning staff, right? But it also, I want, you know, to think about, like I said, the things that also you guys are already doing. Like, and that's what we're here to talk, right? You're sharing some of your strategic planning you're doing yourself for transit, you know? And we already heard earlier today, a lot of the projects that are getting on the ground. So it's all of that coming together. But the idea is the report helps us solidify maybe what those changes need to be. And if you remember, you know, if we're doing okay in some category, we don't have to dive deep into it. We don't have to have a whole host of recommendations. But it's an opportunity to kind of do that plan, do check. How are we doing?
Yeah.
What do we need to change? And just bearing in mind, we don't have the authority that everyone thinks that we do. We don't just get to wave a wand and change everything. But there are some things that are within our control. So I hope that.
It does, it helps.
Yeah.
Helps me, thank you.
And so let's get to that next slide, because this will help too a little bit. So this is the schedule. Since I had our meeting here in March, so we started today on the left end. We'll get probably meeting number 2, March 1st, and then hopefully meeting number 3 about 4 weeks later from that, if not sooner. I'd like to get a draft report to our board in, by the April meeting, which I think is like April 25th, 26th or so. So we've got 2 more meetings ahead of us. And then that draft report, as I just mentioned, Carl, will get the board to accept that. Or, they
Okay.
might ask us to come back together.
Right.
And on the lower half there, you see, we've been collecting the data. We're still collecting data. We're trying to refine certain, metrics. And then we'll also be tracking our plans that are coming out. Vision Zero released today. So that really focuses on those safety projects. And then active transportation will be rolling out a few weeks after that. And then, of course, maybe we're shooting for that April timeframe to sort of wrap that report up and kick off the regional transportation plan, which means another plan, Kira, thank you, is working on, which is the public participation plan. So, yeah, be kind to us over the next few months. No, I'm just kidding. So that's sort of the schedule. And then, of course, once that gets kicked off over the summer, we'll be doing a lot of outreach. And through that, I think you all know, and the reason why this committee is here and the people are selected who they are is because we all work on that together. So that's the idea. And then officially, if it's accepted and approved, then we work on the RTP together. And then in 2 years, we'll be back here having another conversation, checking in on our VMT.
It is like, I was just looking, it's kind of funny, the timing, because this, the report goes to the governing board this summer. And it's supposed to have recommendations for things to include in the RTP, and the governing board has to say whether or not they want to include them, but then there's a whole nother year of development. So, the way that this body is set up in the schedule, it almost, it's like a kind of an early touch, and then not really another like binding chance to give feedback again. I mean, I know we'll keep meeting and everything, but it's just.
Great point, Gavin.
Yeah.
So with the regional transportation plan, there are a lot of touch points.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
No, but the transportation committee, newer, it used to be EIP, which was the EIP group with transportation, are now 2 separate committees. So the transportation committee will be receiving regular check-ins from us on the regional transportation plan. So you're not off the hook.
No, I know, it's just like, but it's just kind of
Yeah.
like these recommendations, the governing board, these are the only ones the governing board has to respond to, or the ones that come this
But
summer.
then they get another crack at it in the RTP.
For sure.
Think of it that way.
Yeah, no, I totally see what
Yeah,
you're saying, just
yeah.
thinking about how to like frame things and, how strong recommendations we want to give when there's gonna be a whole nother year of data collection and
I
discussion,
do what you're
you know what I
saying.
mean?
There's a gap in that time,
Yeah.
right?
Data kind of-
I mean, there may be potentially things that we could work on sooner than later, depending on where they fall.
Mm.
If it's a policy in the RTP, obviously that will wait. If there's some other thing some other barrier.
Or just if we recommend something, then a year later, we're like, oh, that didn't make any sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why you see that adaptive wheel, right? Is we're gonna see how things go and then adapt. And I know right now on the South Shore, right, lots in flux, so we'll see how that goes and, see where things kind of stand. I want to make sure there's no other hands or questions online. We went over, thank you guys.
There's no other hands raised.
Okay, all right, so one more slide. So this is a public meeting, so I want to make sure we give our public a moment for public interest comments. We had a few folks online.
There are some folks online, but there's no hands raised yet. No hands raised.
Thank you, Jess. All right, that's it for us, meeting 1 on the books, and we'll see you on March 1st.
Very good.
Okay, all right,
O'clock.
thank you.